I'm going to kill you, Mountain Man told the fat girl, his enemy's daughter, but fell in love. The Wasatch Mountains in early spring looked peaceful from the outside. Pine ridges dusted with late snow, meltwater streams carving through stone. But deep inside a cavern hidden beneath a sheer cliff wall, a man sharpened a blade with the quiet fury of a storm waiting to break. Absalom Reaper Grimwood had stopped being a man 25 years ago. What remained was vengeance wearing a human shape. He sat cross-legged on the cold rock floor, the massive Bowie knife glinting beneath torchlight. Each stroke of the whetstone sang with restrained violence. His silver hair, turned white long before its time, was braided tightly down his back. Scars, pale and ridged, ran across his thick arms and massive chest like the map of every battle he had survived. His eyes, a bleak gray-black, held the same emptiness as a grave at midnight. He had once been gentle, a husband, a father, a man who believed the frontier could still offer peace. Then Cyrus Blackwell burned everything he loved. Reaper could still see it as though it lived beneath his eyelids. Miriam lying lifeless across the hearth, their two boys butchered near the door, Abigail, his little Abigail, curled beneath the table, her tiny hand still clutching the wooden doll he carved for her. The screams that tore from him that day had never stopped echoing. For 20 long years he hunted Blackwell's gang, finding each outlaw one by one in mining camps, saloons, ravines, and outlaw dens. 15 men died under his blade or his rifle. Only one remained, the monster who commanded them all. But Cyrus Blackwell was now an old man, sickly, bedridden, and slipping toward death by nature's slow mercy. That was not justice. That was escape. So Reaper chose another path, the only one that made sense to a man who had lived on rage for a quarter century. If he could not make Cyrus suffer directly, he would destroy what Cyrus loved most, his daughter, Prudence Blackwell, a convent girl, a sheltered woman who had lived far from her father's sins, innocent. It did not matter. Blood was blood. Pain was pain. A life for a life. He rose from the stone floor, sheathing the great knife. The fury inside him crackled like a winter storm as he stepped toward the cave entrance and looked down the long trail toward the distant monastery. "I'm going to kill you," he murmured into the cold air, as though speaking to the woman he had never met. "And through you, your father will finally feel everything he made me feel." Night draped the monastery like a veil of ink, the stone walls glowing faintly under a silver-font moon. Most of the sisters slept. Only a few candles flickered behind narrow windows, small islands of light in a sea of darkness. Prudence Blackwell knelt alone in the chapel, her hands folded, her breath trembling with quiet devotion. She didn't see the shadow slip between columns. She didn't hear the massive figure crossing the marble floor. The first thing she knew was a hand, huge, calloused, cold as iron, clamping over her mouth. She screamed, but the sound died against his palm. Reaper lifted her as though she weighed nothing, her full figure no hindrance to his monstrous strength. The startled gasp caught in her throat as her rosary clattered across the floor. He carried her through the dark corridor, boots silent as a hunter's. Once outside, he lashed her wrists, gagged her, and threw her over his shoulder like a sack of grain. The monastery bell slept on, unaware that one of their own was being stolen by the most feared man in the mountains. When they reached his horse, he set her across the saddle in front of him. She struggled weakly, her breath ragged, tears streaking her round cheeks. But even through her terror, She felt the strange thing. He did not hurt her. His hands, though enormous and capable of violence, never squeezed, never bruised. They held her firmly, but not cruelly. Hours later, he dragged her into the cavern, his home, his prison, his shrine of vengeance. The torches snapped awake as he lit them, revealing walls scarred with knife marks and memories of violence. Reaper pushed Prudence toward the center of the cave. She stumbled on her skirts and fell hard onto the cold stone. "Stand up," he ordered. His voice could have been the scrape of boulders sliding from a mountain cliff. Prudence rose slowly, terrified yet strangely composed. Her blue eyes, stunning even through tears, met his black-gray stare. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "You're Prudence Blackwell," he said, his tone flat, unyielding. "Yes," she breathed, "but I haven't seen my father in 10 years. I don't even know." "You are his blood," Reaper snapped, "and blood is all that matters." He withdrew the Bowie knife, its blade gleaming like winter moonlight. Prudence's breath hitched. Her entire body trembled. "I'm going to kill you," he said without emotion, lifting the knife. She burst into sobs. "Please, please, I beg you. I've done nothing. I don't know what he did, but I'm not him." Reaper stepped closer. She shut her eyes, expecting steel, expecting pain. But it didn't come. Something tugged inside him, a hesitation, a memory. Prudence's face, round-cheeked, soft, terrified, overlapped with Abigail's in a flickering, unbearable ghost of a vision. Her eyes opened, glistening with tears, and she spoke with a trembling clarity that rooted him to the ground. "If taking my life will ease your suffering, I won't fight you." Her voice broke. "But killing me will not bring your family back." Reaper's hand tightened on the knife. His jaw clenched. His chest heaved. "You don't even know what your father did," he growled. Prudence slowly shook her head. "He was a cruel man. Even as a child I felt it. I left him when I was 18 because I didn't want to become like him." She swallowed hard. "If he hurt you, I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry." Her apology was not defensive nor fearful, simply sincere. That sincerity was a blade far sharper than his own. Reaper felt the first crack in the wall he'd built around his soul for 25 years. She continued softly, "I don't want to die. I'm terrified. But I forgive you for wanting to kill me. That pain inside you, it must be unbearable." The words dug under his ribs and pulled something raw, something wounded, to the surface. For a moment, the cave blurred. Absalom Grimwood, the reaper of the mountains, dropped the tip of his knife an inch. Not much, but enough. "You speak of forgiveness like you understand the world," he growled. "I don't," she said quietly. "I only understand suffering and how it makes us do things we never imagined." Silence swallowed the cavern. Reaper turned away suddenly, as though unable to endure the weight of her gaze. His voice, when it came, was roughened, not softer, but no longer lethal. "I won't kill you tonight," he said. "Tomorrow, we will see." He walked deeper into the cave, leaving Prudence standing alone in the flickering firelight, trembling but alive. "Thank you," she whispered after him, though she wasn't sure he heard. Morning crept into the cave in thin, pale strands of light, slipping through the narrow cracks in the stone ceiling. Prudence sat curled in one corner, arms wrapped around her knees, her breath still unsteady from the fear that had haunted her all night. She had slept little, only when exhaustion forced her eyes shut. When she awoke, She found food waiting beside her, a tin plate with coarse bread, a strip of dried venison, and a cup of water. No knife, no tools, no means to harm him. Reaper thought of everything, but the fact that he fed her at all whispered of something she wasn't sure she understood. She watched him from across the cave as he worked, sharpening a hatchet, oiling a rifle, plaiting rope with slow, deliberate motions. The massive muscles along his arms shifted under scars like shadows moving beneath the earth. He didn't look at her once, yet she felt him aware of her every breath. Hours passed before he finally spoke. "You pray every morning," he said without lifting his gaze from the blade he polished. Prudence startled. His voice still shook the cave walls, but it no longer carried the same executioner's edge. "Yes," she said quietly, "I pray for strength and for clarity." "Pray for survival," Reaper muttered. "That's more useful." Prudence studied him, the man who had slaughtered murderers for half his life, who had stalked her through darkness, who had dragged her from sanctuary. Yet here he sat, feeding her, watching over her, keeping her alive when killing her had been his singular purpose for 25 years. She gathered a breath. "Did you sleep at all?" He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Prudence slowly approached his side of the cave, stopping several feet away. "May I ask something?" He paused the whetstone against the blade. "If you must." "Why did you decide not to kill me last night?" The cave went unbearably still. Reaper set the knife down and stared into the fire, the flames reflecting like ghosts in his dark eyes. "You looked at me," he rumbled, "the way my daughter used to, before—" His jaw tightened. "Before everything." Prudence's voice trembled. "I'm so sorry for what you lost." "Don't be," he snapped, though the harshness didn't reach his eyes. "Sorry is useless." He dragged a harsh breath through his teeth. "Grief is a creature that eats you from the inside. You learn to live with what it leaves behind." He stood abruptly, towering over her, as if needing the distance. "Stay here. Don't wander. The mountain will kill you faster than I can." He left the cave. She listened to his heavy footsteps fade until only the drip of distant water remained. Alone, she exhaled shakily. Something in him was shifting, pain cracking open just enough for a sliver of humanity to bleed through. That night, he returned with a dead elk slung over his shoulder. Prudence gasped when she saw him stagger under its weight, blood staining his shirt from a shallow cut across his ribs. "You're hurt," she breathed. "It's nothing." He dropped the elk onto the stone floor with a thud. "That's not nothing." She rushed to him before she could think better of it. Reaper stiffened, startled by her touch as she took his arm. His muscles tensed under her fingers, solid as carved stone. "It will heal," he insisted. "You could get an infection." "Sit down," she said, her voice unexpectedly firm. His brows lowered. "I don't take orders." "Then take kindness," she replied softly. He froze. Kindness? A word he had not heard in his direction for decades. After a long moment, he allowed her to guide him to the fire. She tore a strip of linen from her underskirt and cleaned the wound as best she could. He watched her with the wary confusion of a wild animal that had never been touched gently. "You're shaking," he said suddenly. "I'm not used to tending someone who could kill me in a heartbeat," she whispered. A muscle ticked in his jaw. "If I wanted you dead, you would be." "Yes," she said, "but you don't." Reaper's breath stuttered. A dangerous truth. one he hadn't admitted even to himself. He stood abruptly and stepped back, as though proximity to her might burn him. "Eat," he ordered gruffly, nodding at the steaming meat he'd prepared. "You're weak. Weak people die up here." She sat down slowly. "Why do you care if I die?" His eyes snapped to hers with a force that stole her breath. "I don't," he said, but something in his voice faltered, and Prudence heard that falter. That night, as the fire dimmed, Reaper watched her drift to sleep, curled into herself, breath soft, her auburn hair catching embers of light. Something twisted in him painfully. Protectiveness, guilt, longing. He didn't know. He only knew one thing. He could not kill her. Not today, not tomorrow, maybe not ever. "Damn you," he whispered to the darkness, though the words held no venom. "You're breaking something inside me." Prudence, half asleep, murmured a prayer of peace. Reaper closed his eyes. For the first time in 25 years, the nightmares did not come. The days lengthened, and winter loosened its grip on the Wasatch Peaks. What had begun as captivity turned quietly, impossibly, into something else. The cave wasn't just a prison anymore. Traces of warmth crept into it, as though Prudence's presence softened the very stone. Reaper noticed it before she did. The silence between them changed. It was no longer the tense quiet of predator and prey, but the stillness of two people circling truths neither dared to touch. Prudence cleaned, organized, and coaxed the cave into a space that breathed rather than glowered. She swept out debris with a woven pine branch broom. She stitched new blankets from elk hide and softened the edges of the stone shelves with cloth lining. She found a way to hang his weapons in neat order, even polishing the ones she dared touch. It startled him. Most people feared him. Most feared his weapons more. She treated them like objects belonging to a man she was trying to understand. One evening, as she arranged his rifles with careful precision, Reaper grunted, "You're making my cave look civilized." She glanced over her shoulder, cheeks pink. "Is that a problem?" He hesitated. "No, just strange." "Strange good or strange bad?" His brows lowered, as though deciphering emotions was a physical effort. "Strange. Good." Her smile, shy and unexpected, nearly knocked the breath from him. She cooked now, too. Not the charred slabs of meat he had survived on for years, but hearty stews, wild onion fritters, berry compotes, sweetened with mountain honey she found along the ridge. The first time she set a steaming bowl in front of him, he stared at it with suspicion. "What is that?" he rumbled. "Food," she said gently. "Warm food." "I like food that bleeds," she laughed, the sound light, bell-like, unimaginable in this cavern of ghosts. "Try it." He did, and the groan that slipped from him was so involuntary, so deeply satisfied, Prudence's heart stuttered. The idea that she could bring pleasure to a man who had lived in darkness for so long filled her with a warmth she could not name. "You cook like my wife used to." His voice cracked unexpectedly. "No, not the taste, the care." Prudence softened. "I'm honored she was a good cook." She was. His gaze drifted to the fire, heavy with memory. "You remind me of her sometimes." Not the look of her. Miriam had been slender, willow-like. Prudence was full, soft, shaped like a woman meant for warmth, not fragility, but the gentleness, the quiet determination, the fierce compassion. Yes, those lived in both women. The next day, as a storm rolled in, Prudence found Reaper repairing the damaged outer ledge of the cave. He swung the hammer with terrifying power, driving wedge stones into place. She stepped beside him nervously. Can I help? He blinked. Help? With this? I've repaired monastery walls before. You? He snorted. You'd break your hands. Give me a chance, she challenged softly. His stare was long and unreadable. Then he offered her a smaller mallet. Hold the brace, he instructed. She did. And though he worked with enough force to shake the stone under her palms, his strikes never once put her at risk. He adjusted his angle each time to keep her safe. He slowed down when her arms trembled, and when she nearly slipped on loose gravel, his hand shot out instantly, gripping her waist, steadying her with a gentleness that contradicted everything his appearance proclaimed. She froze at the contact. So did he. Her breath hitched. His fingers, massive, rough, capable of killing, remained at her hip, holding her as though she were made of fragile glass. "You're safe," he murmured. The words were so soft, so unexpected, her knees nearly buckled. That night, thunder cracked across the mountain tops, and rain beat against the stone like fists. Prudence lay beneath her elk-hide blanket, shivering from the cold drafts that seeped through the cave walls. A shadow fell across her. Reaper knelt, holding a larger buffalo-hide blanket. "You're cold." "A little," she admitted. He draped the heavy pelt over her shoulders. "This will keep you warm." "You'll freeze," she protested. He shook his head. "I've slept in snowbanks." Still, but then his eyes lifted to hers. Something raw, something unguarded passed between them. "Prudence," he said roughly, "I know I took you captive. I know I meant to kill you. But I don't want you to suffer." Her hand trembled as she touched the edge of the blanket he'd given her. "Why are you being so kind?" His breath shuddered. "Because I can't be cruel to you anymore." She swallowed, heart pounding. "Why?" Reaper didn't answer, or maybe he couldn't. Instead, he stood abruptly and returned to his side of the cave, where sleep never fully claimed him, but nightmares always did. Over the next weeks, something undeniable unfolded. Prudence began to laugh again, small at first, then freely, when he said something unintentionally dry or gruff. Reaper found himself listening not to survive, not for danger, but just to hear the cadence of her voice. She asked about his life, not the death in it, the life. The sons he taught to carve, the daughter who braided flowers into his beard, the wife who sang while she cooked. He didn't cry when he spoke of them, but his voice frayed at the edges. Prudence noticed, and each story she listened to knit a thread between them. One evening, she found him sitting outside the cave at dusk, watching the orange glow fade behind the distant peaks. "May I sit with you?" she asked. He nodded. Silence stretched, comfortable for once. Finally she whispered, "Do you still want to kill me?" He exhaled long and low. "No," he said. Then softer, "I don't think I could ever hurt you." Her heart fluttered. What changed? "You," he murmured. "You changed everything." Heat warmed her cheeks. "Reaper?" He turned his massive frame toward her, expression stripped bare. "My name is Absalom," he said. "I haven't let anyone call me that in 25 years. She smiled, tender, luminous. "Absalom," she repeated softly, and the sound of her voice wrapped his name in a gentleness he hadn't felt since Miriam. He closed his eyes. Something inside him broke open, not with pain, but with the terrifying possibility of hope. "Prudence," he whispered, "you're making me want to live again." The wind carried their breath into the night, and for the first time in decades, Absalom felt the future reaching toward him instead of the past, pulling him under. Spring crept down the mountains in soft breaths of warm wind, melting the last patches of stubborn snow. The cave became less of a shelter from cold and more of a refuge from the world, a world that had shaped both Prudence and Absalom in ways neither fully understood. But peace never lasted long in the frontier. One afternoon, Prudence found Absalom sitting alone near the cave entrance, sharpening a smaller knife, not with rage this time, but with thought. She sensed something different in the air, something unsettled. "What's wrong?" she asked, gently laying a basket of wild herbs beside him. He didn't look at her at first. "You've been keeping something from me." Her heart lurched. I haven't lied to you." "No," he agreed softly, "but you haven't told me everything." She swallowed. "About what?" He finally turned, his gray-black eyes unreadable. "Your father." Prudence stiffened. "I told you, I have not seen him in a decade." "That part I believe," he said quietly. "But last night, while you slept, a rider came through the lower pass. I found tracks, hoof prints, heavy ones." He paused. "Made by lawmen." Fear shot through her. "Are they looking for me?" "No," he said. "They were looking for Cyrus. Word has spread. He is dying faster than expected." A muscle jumped in his jaw. "Dying men talk, Prudence. They confess. They send for their blood." She froze in place, the herbs trembling in her hands. "I didn't know he was dying," she whispered. Absalom studied her face, searching perhaps for deceit. He found none. "You're telling the truth?" he murmured. "Good." She lifted her gaze. "What else did you find out?" The silence before his answer was a jagged wound. "He wrote you a letter." Prudence's breath caught. "A letter? For me?" "Yes." Absalom's hands tightened around the knife. "They're searching the mountains for you, not to save you, to deliver the letter to his daughter." Prudence shook her head slowly. "I don't understand. Why would he want to contact me now?" "Because guilt eats at dying men," Absalom said bitterly. "He wants forgiveness." Prudence felt a hollow ache open inside her. "I don't know if I can forgive him." "Good," Absalom said far too quickly, as though relief slipped out before he could hide it. She looked at him gently. "But you want me to?" He froze, his voice cracked. "No, I want you safe. That's all." Safe. The word lingered between them, intimate as a touch, but safety was already cracking. 3 days later, the world found them. Prudence was stirring a pot of stew when the distant thunder of hooves echoed along the ridge. She stiffened immediately, fear curling beneath her ribs. "Absalom," she called, voice faint. He was already moving, a shadow of lethal intent, grabbing his rifle and striding toward the cave mouth. When Prudence reached the entrance, she saw them too. 6 riders emerging through the pines, armed, stern, their badges glinting beneath the sun. U.S. Marshals. Her heart stopped. The lead rider raised his voice. "Absalom Grimwood, we know you have the woman. Hand her over peacefully, and no one dies." Silence struck hard as a hammer. Prudence's voice trembled. "They think you kidnapped me." "You're not going anywhere," Absalom growled. She caught his arm. "If they attack, they won't touch you." His tone sharpened with a deadly promise. "I'll kill every last one of them if I must." Terror and tenderness crashed inside her. "You can't kill lawmen," she whispered. "I've done worse." "Absalom, please, listen." He didn't. He stepped forward, a giant emerging into daylight, rifle in hand, every inch the reaper the frontier feared. The marshals tensed immediately. "Easy!" their captain shouted. We have no quarrel with you. We only want the girl." Absalom snarled, "If you come any closer, you won't leave this mountain breathing." Prudence hurried to his side, gripping his sleeve. "Absalom, look at me." It took a moment before he turned, torn between violence and something far more fragile. "Let me talk to them," she whispered. "No, please, if you fight them, you'll be branded an outlaw again, and I don't want you hunted. I won't let you become the monster they already think you are." His chest rose and fell in harsh, uneven breaths. "You're not going with them. They'll use you to get to Cyrus. They'll feed you to the wolves of politics. You don't know what men like that can do." "Then stand with me," she said softly. "But let me speak." She stepped forward before he could reach for her. The marshals aimed quickly, rifles rising. "Stop!" Prudence cried. "Please, don't shoot. He hasn't harmed me." The captain frowned. "Ma'am, he abducted you." "Yes," she said, voice shaking, "but I stayed because I chose to. I am not a prisoner anymore." A murmur rose among the men. "He saved my life more than once," Prudence continued, breath uneven. "And I will not leave with you, not without knowing why you're here." The captain hesitated, then removed a leather pouch from his saddlebag. "Your father is dead," he said. Prudence's knees nearly buckled. Absalom lunged a step forward as though to catch her, but she steadied herself. The marshal continued. "Before he died, he confessed everything. The murders, the raids, the massacre." His gaze slid to Absalom. "He named your family, Grimwood, all of it." A tremor ran through Absalom's entire body. "And he left a letter," the captain said, "for her." He extended the pouch. Prudence took it with trembling fingers. Absalom's voice was rough stone. "Don't read that poison." But Prudence shook her head and unsealed the pouch. Inside was a folded sheet of paper, stained, creased, written in a shaky hand. She read, silently. Then tears filled her eyes. "What does it say?" Absalom demanded. Prudence looked up, and the sorrow in her face softened him instantly. "He admitted everything," she whispered. "He begged forgiveness, not from the law, from you." Her voice cracked. "He said he destroyed your life, and he was too much a coward to face you again." Absalom's breath hitched as though struck. Prudence stepped closer. "Absalom, he asked me to tell you something. I don't want to hear it. He wrote it for you." She took a breath. "He said he wished someone had loved him enough to stop him from becoming a monster." Silence crushed the mountain. Prudence reached for Absalom's hand. "And he said he hoped someone would love you enough to make you stop hating yourself." Reaper's face collapsed, not with rage, not with grief, with the realization that Cyrus, the man he hated more than anyone alive, had somehow seen the very truth Prudence had been trying to give him. He looked down at her, his voice unsteady for the first time. "Do you?" She knew what he meant. "Do you love me enough to save me?" Her fingers threaded through his. "Yes," she whispered. "I always have." The marshals watched in stunned silence. The world had found them. But for the first time, Absalom Grimwood wasn't alone in facing it. A storm gathered over the Wasatch Peaks, one of wind, thunder, and the kind that lived inside a man who'd spent half his life killing shadows from the past. Absalom Grimwood stood between Prudence and the marshals, his enormous frame blocking her from every angle, every threat. He expected them to draw, expected the gunfire, expected one last brutal fight. But instead, the captain raised a gloved hand. "Grimwood," he said evenly, We're not here to arrest you." Absalom didn't lower his rifle. "You expect me to believe that? You avenged your family 20 years ago. Those men were wanted dead or alive. Some of us think you did the territory a service." The captain's gaze hardened. "But if you kill federal officers today, everything changes. You'll hang, and he nodded at Prudence, will lose the only person who's ever protected her." The words burned through Absalom like hot iron. Prudence stepped closer, slipping her hand into his, not to restrain him, but to steady him. "Absalom," she whispered, "don't do this." He swallowed hard. The captain continued, "We came only to deliver the letter. Cyrus Blackwell named every crime he ever committed. He cleared your name, and hers." Reaper's breath stilled. "My name? Cleared?" "Officially," the captain said. "You are no longer a wanted man. You're free." Free. A word he had never imagined hearing again. A word that stripped away decades of rage in a single blow. But before he could respond, one of the younger marshals spat onto the ground. "This is ridiculous. He's a murderer." His rifle angled upward, too quickly, toward Prudence. Absalom moved before thought could catch him. A blur of muscle and fury, his body slammed into her, shielding her completely. A shot cracked through the mountains, echoing like a cannon. Stones splintered inches from Prudence's face as Absalom held her tight beneath him. "Hold your fire!" the captain roared. But it was too late. Absalom rose slowly, like an ancient beast woken from a slumber of blood. His voice was a low growl. "You aim at her again," he said, looking at the young marshal, "and I'll tear you apart with my hands." The marshal backed away, pale as death. Prudence touched Absalom's chest, trembling. "Are you hurt?" "No," he said, and pulled her closer. "You're safe. That's all that matters." And for one suspended moment, the storm inside him cleared. He realized he had shielded her with the same instinct he once saved for Miriam and for Abigail. Something deeper than vengeance, older than rage, love. The captain glared at the young marshal until the man dropped his rifle. "We're done here," he announced sharply. "Blackwell is dead, the case is closed, and the girl stays where she chooses." Absalom tightened his hold on Prudence. "She chooses here," he said quietly. The captain tipped his hat. "Then may God guide you both." One by one, the marshals rode off, their silhouettes fading into the pines until the forest swallowed them whole. Silence fell, the kind of silence that changes everything. Prudence turned to Absalom and placed a hand against his jaw. "You saved me," she whispered. "Again." His breath trembled. "I would face the whole world if it meant protecting you." She stepped closer. "You already have." The storm cloud shifted, letting a sliver of golden light spill across the ridge. Absalom looked down at her, this soft, stubborn, courageous woman who had walked into the darkest part of him and lit a candle. "Prudence," he said, voice rough as gravel, "I have nothing left to hate, not when you're standing beside me." Her eyes filled with tears. "Then let's face whatever comes next, together." He cupped her cheek, thumb brushing the tear that slipped down. "Together," he agreed. Above them, thunder rolled, but it felt less like danger and more like blessing, echoing through the mountains that had once buried him in grief and now bore witness to something entirely new. Dusk settled over the Wasatch Range like a warm blanket, softening the jagged silhouettes of the peaks. The storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean. The pines glittered with droplets, the air rich with the scent of wet earth and smoke from Absalom's small fire outside the cave. Prudence sat beside him on a rough-hewn bench he'd carved from a fallen cedar. The firelight painted her face in gold, her auburn hair catching every flicker like strands of ember. For the first time since he'd dragged her from the monastery, she wasn't trembling, she wasn't afraid, she was home. Absalom watched the flames, hands clasped loosely in front of him, massive hands that had taken lives, saved lives, and now trembled slightly because she was close enough to touch. "You're quiet," Prudence said softly. He nodded. "I don't know what comes next." "Does that frighten you?" The question hung in the cooling air. Once, the Reaper would have said no. Once, the unknown was simply another battlefield. But he had someone to lose now, someone who made the future terrifying, because it mattered. "Yes," he answered honestly. Prudence reached for his hand, threading her fingers between his. His breath caught. "You don't have to be alone anymore," she whispered. "Not in your guilt, not in your memories, not in your fear." He stared at their joined hands, her soft, warm, determined fingers wrapped around the hand that once held a knife to her throat. "I never thought I would deserve this," he murmured. "Peace, a chance to start again." She squeezed his hand gently. "It's not something you deserve, Absalom. It's something you choose." "And you?" His voice was barely audible. "Do you choose this? Choose me?" She smiled, a quiet, gentle smile that made his chest ache. "I chose you the moment you chose not to kill me." He laughed under his breath, a rusty sound he didn't recognize as his own. "That was the moment everything started changing for me, too." Prudence leaned her head against his shoulder. He froze, then relaxed by degrees, as though learning a new language through touch alone. His arm came around her back, tentative at first, then sure. The fire crackled. Night deepened. The mountains held their breath. "I can't promise the world will accept us," Absalom said. "They'll talk. They'll judge. They'll wonder how a man like me could stand beside a woman like you." She tilted her face up to him. "Then let them wonder." Silence, warm and full. "You're safe here," Absalom whispered, voice thick with emotion. "With me. If you'll have this place, if you'll have me." Prudence's eyes glimmered. A single tear slid down her cheek, not from sorrow, but from something deeper. Hope. "I will," she whispered, "as long as you'll have me in return." His arm tightened around her. The fire glowed brighter for a moment, as though agreeing. The mountains around them, once a graveyard of his grief, now held the fragile beginning of a life he hadn't dared imagine. And as the first stars pierced the velvet night, a single question lingered, one neither needed to answer yet. Would love be enough to save them from the world that waited below? Stories like this remind us how powerful the human heart can be. Even in the harshest frontier, even between two souls scarred by violence and loss, love can carve out a place to breathe, to heal, to begin again. Thank you for traveling with Absalom and Prudence across the mountains, through fear and fire, into the fragile quiet they built together. Wherever you're listening from, a busy city, a quiet room, a distant country, your presence here matters. Tell me, where in the world are you hearing this story? And if you still believe love can grow in impossible places, stay close. The next tale waits for you.